This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha.
He wanted to find something that no one could take away from him. And I was like, I don't know. They're like, you need to you find your voice. And I was like, welcome. A lot of them think of it as a hobby. You open up a business account, INM accounting and bookkeeping services, legal services. Artists can thrive here. We have the heritage and the history already.
When you're born of parents who are famous for music, and not just 15 minutes of fame famous, but legitimately legendary, and you also grow up in a place known as the home of whole music genres, things can go one of a couple ways. You either go all in on carrying that legacy forward, or you go as far away from it as possible to be your very own you. In the case of Alonzo Townsend, it's been the former and some of the latter too. The youngest son of the blues giant Henry Mule Townsend accomplishes that legacy work as the manager of incredible local talent and the man behind the Townsendx3 Agency artist and brand engagement. But he's doing things very much his way, and by doing so, he's making a way for others too. Here to talk about his journey and the paths he sees forward for a city he loves, we welcome Alonzo Townsend in the flesh.
Hey, Elaine.
Alonzo, welcome to the program.
Man, it's an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Alonzo, you were literally born into music.
Yeah.
What was your childhood like growing up around your father, blues legend Henry Townsend, and your mother, Vernell?
Yeah. I didn't understand the real gravity of who my parents was until maybe I got close to my teenage years. But in an aspect, I knew exactly what they did. My dad was big on having me a part of his business from a kid. From 9, I would be in Snooks, like a sideshow, writing out his checks. People would be like, oh my God, how did he do it? You got him writing checks? But yeah, he had me writing checks and reading contracts and doing computer invoicing and typing letterheads out for him when I was a kid. I was selling CDs for him at festivals. I was fortunate to travel with him a lot. But through all of that, I still didn't really understand how much of weight, not only my dad, that both of them walked in and, the legacy behind it.
Uh-huh. Now, when it comes to that work, did you ever at any point feel like, why am I doing this?
Absolutely. Because, normal kids, so I say quote unquote normal kids. I grew up in North St. Louis, like right down the street from Matthew Dickey's. I would always want to go outside, ride my bike. I was a huge wrestling fan as a kid. My mom was a big wrestling fan, so I grew up watching wrestling with her. So I was into that stuff heavily as a kid. So I would want to do those things, and Dad would be like, "No, until you get this taken care of, you ain't, you got time to do this first." And I'd be like, "Oh my God!" But I was like a tiny salesman and learning the business young, and I didn't really know what he was grooming me for. Fast forward to what I do now, but I didn't understand really the gravity of what he was grooming me for at the time, because, as kids we want to go outside and get dirty and do boy stuff, you know.
Right.
And I probably had minimal of that as a kid more than anything.
Well, and home was St. Louis, even with all of the fame that your father in particular garnered. You remained here in St. Louis, and your dad performed for several decades, no exaggeration there.
Absolutely.
And in addition to, going to different places within the country, also globally, right?
Yeah.
He was traveling.
Yeah.
And that was through his mid-90s. What was it, do you think, that kept him in St. Louis?
That's a good question. A brief story of my dad. He was born in 1909 in Shelby, Mississippi. At the age of 9, the same age he had me writing checks, he ran away from home to avoid a whooping from his father, who was a very strict individual. But he had blew some snuff in his cousin's eyes through a sugar cane, and so my grandpa would be like, I got something coming for you later on. And so my dad literally ran away from home, jumped on the train, ended up in Cairo, Illinois, and then ended up in St. Louis. And we're talking about a child in like the 1900s, like 1919, 1915, stuff like that. So this is crazy. And then he found his way in St. Louis, and he made a living here of different ways. And a lot of his quote-unquote idols, the Lonnie Johnsons, those were Walter Davises. They were here, and they were playing music already. He was learning from them, and that he seen something that he not only he wanted to do, but the biggest thing is kind of what I connect to a lot of my work doing now, which we'll talk about later. But it's he wanted to find something that no one could take away from him, that he could make a living doing for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. He didn't have to clock in and clock out for anyone else. Just as something that no one could take away from him. And that ended up being, music. And I think that, once he got here and once he started getting ingrained in that, shortly he became known as, one of the people to be when it came to St. Louis blues for so long. And when his career started, a Grammy and all that stuff didn't exist.
Right.
He performed all the way up until he passed away. We were up in Grafton, Wisconsin in 2006. At the age of 96, he was getting a Walk of Fame award there and was scheduled to perform. And that was the first time he had ever been back there since 1929, which is where he made his first recording.
Wow.
And so, it's so crazy. It's full circle because he ended up going back to the place where where his career started, and that's where he passed away at.
Yeah.
But he passed away doing what he loved doing, and the passion of what he had learned, and what something he gave himself that nobody could take away.
So he clearly lived a very full and interesting life.
A very interesting life. Very interesting life. And that Grammy thing, the year after he passed away, he won a Grammy.
Yeah.
But, he never expired that. So some of it's different because a lot of musicians, sometimes they have different levels of what they aspire, of what success is.
Right.
Especially nowadays, that's like the creme de la creme.
Mm-hmm.
And so for someone to start something that they loved passionately doing with no real level of success, and then ending up having that be that way full circle, that's something special. That's definitely a full life.
Yeah, recognition of life's work
Absolutely.
too, right?
Absolutely.
So his love of St. Louis, his love of music, and your mother's too. I know that in a lot of the interviews that you've done previously, most of the focus is on your dad, your mother as well.
She was an accomplished singer in her own right, and she recorded a lot with my dad, performed a lot with my dad too. Some of his most recognizable songs, like Tears Come Rolling Down. That's him and my mom on that song.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That song's been recorded by so many different people, like Bonnie Raitt and stuff, but that's him and my mom. Why do we love each other so? That's him and my mom, you know? And so, she was a really accomplished singer in her own right, but I think it's always the person that started the seed, I guess, that gets to, get some of the weight. And so that's where my dad comes in at, he really pushed her to sing and to use her voice and to perform with him. And then, so it added to what he was.
So you were raised by parents who were fully into music. And in a way, you were also raised by St. Louis and its musicians too, right? Now, your work and passion is managing musicians and building up St. Louis as a music city. What is it that attracted you to management of musicians rather than your becoming a musician yourself? Yeah,
it's crazy. So, again, my dad groomed me kind of for the business, so I learned a lot of it from him, and I was doing some of this stuff at 15, like Chicago Blues Festival call, and he'll put me on the phone, and he'd like, tell him I want 5,000 and mileage and blah, 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 and I'm like, yeah, my dad, he wants 5,000, so it was something that was already in me, but after my dad passed away in 2006, the very next year my daughter was born. And I really was at this little crossroads thing, like everyone said, it was real. I didn't know what I wanted to do and what I was going to do. I didn't really even tap with the music thing either for a long time. A couple of years went by, and Jeremy Siegel Moss, who's an amazing musician, Bottoms Up Blues Gang, he's been the president of the St. Louis Blues Society for a long time. He had this event called the Baby Blues Showcase, and it was for all artists that was under the age of 30 that played blues and roots music. And he's like, you would be a great representative of this whole thing. He like, have you thought about, coming in and getting back active? And I was like, I don't know. I'm like, sure, I'll do. Like, let's try it. And he started me out emceeing the event, and I emceed it with Kerry Liston. And like at the very first year, I'm like really mimicking, like, yeah, welcome to the Baby, And then, they're like, you need to like, you find you a voice. And so I tied in my love of wrestling, and boxing events.
Okay.
And then I was like, welcome to and people started really liking it. And then that's what got me back into St. Louis music and St. Louis blues. That was the very first thing. Then I spent a long time like working at BB's too, getting myself together. I served and bus tables. I had a second job at the Broadway Oyster Bar. And John Johnson, God bless him, he woke up one morning and called me and said, I had a dream and I need to come and see you. And I'm like, what did I do? Is he finna fire me? And he's like, I just need to meet you somewhere. So I told him to come to my house, and he comes to my house and he says, I had a dream that you were my restaurant manager. And I talked to Vicky about it, and I want to offer it to you. And I was like, man, what, I was kind of like baffled at it. And then I was like, then do I want to go from not making tips anymore to salary? And I was like, because he had the dream of me and it made it easy. So that's what made me say yeah. And in that time, I started meeting other artists. I met someone that's like my god sister now, but Manny, and she goes by LL Manny. And Marquise is my god brother, Marquise Knox. And, Marquise started talking about he wanted to do Knox Entertainment again. He wanted to do his own independent label. He didn't want to get signed. He wanted to, like, just kind of build this foundation. He's like, I want you to come in there and help me. Let's build this thing. Mm-hmm. And so I started doing work with Marquise, and that started getting me kind of itching back again in the whole, like, engagement and management type of thing, because I was kind of like his manager, but I wasn't, at the same time. But I was taking care of a lot of stuff for him and helping him build up the label. And Manny was getting back into music too, and we would talk at the host stand, and she's like, you should manage again. And she really pushed me, and she's like, help me with my music. And I said, okay, let's do it. So I'm helping Marquise, him doing his stuff. I'm helping Manny. I eventually run across Tonina while I was working at the Blues Museum. Tonina was kind of in the same boat, and she's like, she was telling me how frustrated she was. Yeah. And I started talking to her about, what she deserved to get paid. And I'm like, you should help me. I mean, you should let me help you get what you deserve. Mm-hmm. And she's 24 hours. We're at KDHX. And she's like, bring me the paperwork tomorrow and I'll look at it and I'll sign it. And the next day it happened. And the rest is kind of really history. And we'll talk about like that stuff. But though I talk about that story because those are the people that really sparked and pushed me to get what I'm doing. And fast forward, I owe them tremendously because they believed in me for me to be doing the work that I am doing now.
Yeah. So you were prepared by family, mm-hmm. and then it was family who came through with support, mm-hmm. sort of recognizing your gifts and encouraging you. Yeah. Tonina actually was a former intern for the show.
Yeah.
And you were talking about Marquise Knox, your godbrother.
Yeah.
We have some music from him for those who've maybe not heard what he does. Yeah. Let's hear his song, Feel Like Going Home.
Late over the evening, I fly blowing my home. Woke up this morning, all I have was gone wild. Late over the evening, I feel like blowing my horn. Woke up this morning, all I had was gone. Minutes seem like hours, seem like days. You think my baby child should stop her? Oh, low down way, wow. Minutes seem like hours, hours gonna seem like days. You think my baby child should stop? Oh, low down way.
That was local blues musician Marquise Knox and his song, Feel Like Going Home. We're going to take a very quick break here, but we'll be back shortly to continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Now back to our conversation with Alonzo Townsend, the man behind the Townsendx3 Agency and the son of blues legend Henry Mule Townsend. Now, we were listening to some music before, and music is something that you have done as well. And you've got a song on Spotify titled A Letter to My City. Let's hear a bit of that.
Listen, we were placed in the heartbeat of America because God knows we love harder and greater than any other being, any other city I know. But from the outside looking in, they won't let it show. We have the power to illuminate the entire world, to light up small towns, to show true soul, to be the warmth while the world's still cold. Man, you've been in my heart forever, and I refuse to let you down. I seek your well-being, your love, your grace, all of your rights, all of your mistakes. I seek every color, every face, no matter what you love, no matter what it takes, just to unite, to be as one. Show the world the greatest force, the greatest power of love, of happiness that anyone has seen. We can do it, but you gotta understand. Hey you, how you doing? Lord knows.
That was Alonzo Townsend performing his own music, a song titled A Letter to My City, and it was part of a compilation in 2017 by the St. Louis Blues Society.
Yeah.
And that seems very heartfelt, what you're singing in that song. It's very much about hopes and love for St. Louis, which you've talked about. And you're not a full-time performer, but you're clearly dedicated, right, to the success of people who are based here in St. Louis, from St. Louis, building up this music scene. What does the work look like from your perspective? And how do you work with St. Louis musicians to amplify their art?
Absolutely. Well, real quick, shout out to Sean Caroy, who was on that track. It goes bigger. I always say it's bigger than me because I grew up with some of my dad's contemporaries, the Johnny Johnsons, the Oliver Sains, the Tommy Bankheads, the Fontella Basses, the Kim Masseys. I grew up as a kid around these giants, their impact to American music, let alone to world music, is immense. And so my father, included, immense. And so I wanted to give this city, or try to be a hand in giving St. Louis the only thing that we've really missed when it comes to music and it comes to our artists. And that's infrastructure, that's ecosystem. We have the heritage and the history already, if not more than cities like Chicago, Memphis, Austin, Nashville, New Orleans, LA. I can keep going when I talk about musical cities that have their music and their artists wired into their infrastructure. And when I say wired, that means it is into their tourism. It is into literally the fabric of their economy. They make sure that they use it to thrive. They make sure that they have situations and foundational pipelines in place for artists to thrive and not have to leave their cities to be artists. And that's the only thing that St. Louis has missed for so long, from whether it's administrational standpoints, whether it's whatever you want to call it. I don't think that up until now, a lot of this region has really understood how impactful and how beneficial music and artists is to this region. It's happening now. We're in the ripe time. We're in a renaissance when it comes here now. But
why do you think it has not happened before?
I don't think that, like these other cities, and we can name whatever, we can point fingers, but no one really seen the worth, in my opinion, of artists and music here. A lot of them think of it as a hobby. A lot of people think of it like, oh, whatever, they choose to do that in place of other cities like New Orleans and Memphis and Nashville and all that. And so now the work for me is, now I like to do brand management more than I do straight up management with artists. And that is me equipping, or any artist that I sit down with or that's underneath my umbrella. They have LLC. They went and got the EIN number. We sat down and did it together. We opened up a business account. They go take the certificate, open up a business account. And then I either recommend them to found the nonprofits like VLAA that are here in place for them for if they need for accounting and bookkeeping services, for legal services. It's free of charge. I sign them up, and then we actually put them in positions to be small businesses more than musicians. They're entrepreneurs. We put them in the frame of work that their music is a service, so they're providing a service more than they're providing a bonus or a benefit to some of these clubs or to some of these bars. This is the work to do in place of having a union in place. This is equipping musicians with the power and the knowledge to be actual brands. And that helps create an ecosystem. When we put them in the mind frame that it's more collaboration than it is competition, so they take care of each other, they collab, they cross-pollinate, it puts more faces and more voices. When you put a whole bunch of voices together, Elaine, what happens? You have a whole bunch of noise. So now we become inevitable. Now people are coming down here and like, oh, it's a crop of artists. Let me go down to St. Louis and check this out and check this out and see this and see that. So now the spectrum is opened up a lot more. We don't have to necessarily have one face or one voice when you think of St. Louis and St. Louis music. You can think about these multiple faces, and now artists can thrive here. They can have the tools to apply for grants, the bench lines that people like RAC ask for. Sometimes artists, especially when it comes to blues artists, they weren't given this. They think it was a lot easier to get paid under the table or not have 1099s or not have this. And then when it's time to apply for a hardship grant or for a grant to help them in their career, they're told no or they're denied because they weren't equipped with the information and the paperwork that they're going to need to prove or to provide for these type of situations. Now we equip them with that. Now we give them that equity and that power to actually thrive and survive and not feel like they have to leave St. Louis to make it and be an artist.
Right. Now, one of the things that the culture exhibit at the St. Louis Art Museum gets into is about musicians as a brand, right? And one of the questions that is posed at that exhibit is, is the artist a producer or is the artist a product? What do you think of that?
The artist is a producer. They're providing. They are continuing to make a recipe and pour it out, and then they tweak it. And here's another version for me to serve up to you. But that's the mind frame, is putting them into the framework of they're producing a product, they're producing a service, and you have to pay for my service. One of my artists that I do brand management for is Mastermind. And we all know Mastermind is like the beacon of St. Louis hip-hop, like, because he's positioned himself to be a brand. He's one of the first hip-hop artists to have a shoe, and it just happened to be with Dr. Scholl. So a lot of people are like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know that. But regardless of what the brand is, that's an artist positioning themselves as a brand, and I'm producing a product. Same with him being the musical director at St. Louis City SC. We sat down on a January night on a team call, like, hey, and Mo said, I want to know, what does it look like us building a bridge with SC? Like, do we have any ideas? And this is obviously before, inaugural season and all that. And I'm looking at a commercial of Monday Night Football, and they're collaborating with Drake. And the first thing I thought of was, Drake is like the brand ambassador for the Toronto Raptors. Hey, let's pitch you as being like the brand ambassador for St. Louis music for SC. And everyone's like, Julian's on there with me, and Julian Keaton, and who's an amazing mind too. And we're like, all right, let's build it. Let's build this deck. And we pitched that deck to them, and they fell in love with it immediately. And instead of them being like, let's make you a brand ambassador, let's make you a part of this family. And they made a position for him, pitching what we did, creating a product.
So I wish we had so much more time, that I would like to go out of this segment with another musician you work with, because that is your focus, right? Dylan Triplett has a show coming up at City Winery on September 3rd. Here's his song, Barnyard Blues.
Never went to no college, but he ain't no fool, see he'll drop down with some knowledge. As wise an old dude as you ever want to meet. Heard more in the barnyard than he learned in the street. Said it may not mean nothing, but one thing I found, all the hens get quiet when the cock comes around. Barnyard blues. They're sitting on the fence. One started clucking and the other soon commenced. The squawk clucking jabber and the general making noise. Just an endless stupid chatter to shake up all the boys. But late in the midnight, you don't hear a sound. All the hens get quiet when the cocks come around.
That was Dylan Triplett and his song Barnyard Blues.
No, he's 22, Elaine.
22. Oh, my gosh.
He's been doing this since he was like 14. He's 22.
Well, you got an early start, too.
I did.
Thank you so much for coming in to talk with us today. I hope that we can do this again in the future.
Me too. I can't wait. Thank you so much.
Who said to the helper, baby, I'm a need? He said, you got the garden and I'll supply the seed. Heifer said to the bull cow, are you sure you know how? The bull cow said, I may not know much, but I sure know how to plow. Over muscle chickens, when you don't hear a sound, all the hens get quiet when the cock comes around.
This episode was produced by Maya Norfleet.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
St. Louis on the Air proudly supports local artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association. Missouri produces wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details on the variety of products made in the state are at choosewood.com.